Welcome to the Babbling Pastors Podcast. The only podcast you should ever care about. The only content you should ever consume. What are you doing with your life? My name is Michael and this is
Rob.
Oh, so just so everybody knows why I'm laughing,
my
at least.
goodness. I'm never going to be able to listen to that again and not laugh.
That we were talking off air that we should just imagine somebody opening up your church in prayer. I mean, obviously not the regulatory principle that Rob talked about last time, but somebody opening up with prayer with just, "Dear Jesus." I mean, that would automatically, it would just bring, I mean, you want to talk about a revival, right? Everybody's like, I don't know what happened, but I tell you, we just heard the epic sounds, and Pastor Jim was up there, and he was speaking. He never spoke in tongues before, but he was speaking in tongues, and it was just a service. I tell you, I don't think we're coming back, but it was a service.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, they gave me underwear. I don't know what that was.
I don't. It was the weirdest church I've ever been to.
Yeah.
Oh,
and tidy whities. I don't know.
Yeah. If you want to understand that joke, you're gonna have to go back to last episode. So anyway,
yes.
Welcome to the Babbling Pastor Podcast. Once again, looking at the TikToks, not TikToks that you would expect as we have before, in regards to some nonsensical person saying some nonsensical thing and then us refuting it, but rather just conversation starters. And if you're wondering what in the world TikTok did they watch last time in which tidy whities were mentioned, well, you'll have to go listen to it. That's just all I have to say. So today we're gonna go do another one. This one's actually rather short compared to the other ones. To be transparent, I have no clue who this person is. I have no idea at all. All I know is that guy that has the UFC mic is gripping it with his every bit of muscle he has in his body. But I didn't notice that till now. I don't even think I can. He's got a lot of bones that is showing in his hand there. So anyway, this happened, I guess, at some sort of UFC fight. It looks like it's a smaller building, so I don't know if this was like a huge UFC thing, but it is part apparently of the UFC. And I found this rather interesting. It's a little break in what the other ones that we've previously looked at talk about. It's obviously also really short, but let's watch it and then we'll talk about it.
I'm so glad I don't have to wonder what my purpose is anymore. I don't have to wonder what my identity is anymore. And I tell you, man, if you're wondering about what your purpose is and what your identity is, man, you gotta know, you gotta come to know Jesus Christ. He's the only thing that ever gives me purpose. And I tell you guys, I don't care if I win 3 belts in 3 different weight classes. Listen, the greatest thing I've ever done in my life was this.
Okay, so that right there, I was just, again, just to pick these, just so everybody knows the picking process, I was just scrolling through TikTok, seeing what was coming up, seeing what would be interesting to talk about, and I thought, man, that right there is just some good, wholesome content. I mean, in regards to the fact that you don't see that a lot, but when you talk about people's testimonies and just the Lord getting a hold of somebody and somebody understanding, like, this is what my life's about, like, that is a really nice 33-second summation of, like, this is what Jesus does in somebody's life. There's a whole bunch of other videos that, obviously are online that I could pull from for that as well. But that right there, I watched it and I was like, man, that's just like, so I think the connection probably that was in my brain when I watched that is I just preached on John 9 this last Sunday, and the blind man is like, I don't know who he is, but I know this. I was blind and now I see. That's all I know. And so it's very much like that same sort of tone in this video is like, man, I didn't have purpose before. I didn't know what to do with my life before, and surrendering my life to Jesus, like, that's what it is now. And it's just like a really simple, it's not super deep and theological. It's just, hey guys, purpose is something I struggle with. I know who Jesus is now and I don't struggle with that anymore. And the fact of just like this getting on your knees, hands up, surrendering thing during an interview, I think is just incredibly, even if somebody thinks it's goofy, because I think Dana Cook is his name that like runs the UFC. He's been super open about
Dana White.
White. Okay, thank you. Dana Cook, that must be a comedian, or there's somebody with the last name Cook that's a comedian. But so Dana White has been pretty open about, as far as I've seen online, he's just not a big fan of Christians. But the idea that, there's quite a few UFC fighters that I've seen recently, at least online. I don't know their names or anything about them, but that do similar things to this, that have had a really impactful, Jesus has just got a hold of them and it's changing their lives. And then it goes from, so you got a guy here, and statistically, you have men that have no purpose, that are aimless, so they pursue a lot of other things. And you have a guy that people are watching for entertainment that says, hey, I know you're probably struggling with purpose. I did too. And here's Jesus. And I just found that incredibly impactful in regards to just a simple, easy witness that's not, there's not a lot to unpack there.
Yeah. I think the video is interesting. One, because it's a question in a lot of people's mind, even if for things like MMA or fighting, professional fighting, that kind of thing, is that a good and godly thing in the first place? People have these questions, right? But I think that something that can be learned here is just put that out of your mind for a second. And like you were saying, look at this particular situation, this particular guy. I don't know his story. I don't know who he is either. When I was in the Marine Corps, I used to watch the UFC all the time. It was a major cultural thing. And I used to know who all of them are. Now I have no clue who these guys are. But it seemed like he might be the kind of guy who wins belts and that kind of thing. He mentioned that kind of stuff. But whoever he is, I think this is the takeaway. Honestly, I don't think that no matter how conservative you might be when it comes to fighting, professional fighting, I think that you can look at that guy, see and see somebody who was willing to do on national pay-per-view, probably, who was willing to do what so many Christians are not willing to do at work tomorrow. And that is, like, he didn't just say, yeah, thanks, it was a good fight, and just thank my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, and
go God.
Right. And look, I'm not going to knock people who say that necessarily. I know I was kind of teasing just then, but this guy went further than that. Like, he put himself out on a limb and did something that frankly is embarrassing, right? If you're like, you have to be in a Christian, Christ-pleasing mindset to do that, and not be like, so Jesus is the best thing I've ever done, and like he was legitimately like excited and emotional about what Christ apparently is doing in his life. Now, I don't know anything about the guy, but in that particular video, it seems to me like something that we could take lessons from, because he is absolutely not ashamed of the gospel of Christ. So yeah, I thought that was pretty cool.
And one of the things, again, that I think is impactful, and going back to, what was it, the video, the last one we looked at, where you have really this been in church for a long time versus new convert, sort of like the way we look at things. I've told this story before. I don't know if I told it on the podcast, but we support like the halfway houses around us, with a few other churches. And basically what happens is, when these people go into jail, typically for drugs, they obviously get sobered up in lockup, and they get out, and there's programs that they can go into that will assist like a living situation, so they don't go right back into the situation they got them in jail in the first place. Because what they'll tell you in the prison ministry that I've been able to participate and help in is that they'll flat out tell you, they know that if they get out, and then they know who's going to be waiting for them, and then if that person's waiting for them and they go to this house, they're going to get right back in the same path. And they know that, and they're conscious of that. So a lot of them will take these halfway house situation deals to where they'll go live live with a whole bunch of other people that are in very similar situations, that have been through very similar addictions, but that house is there as a community of people to support one another, to prevent, this relapse. And many of these people found, Jesus got a hold of them in prison. They hit rock bottom. They heard the gospel, and most of them, because of the area that I'm in, have heard the gospel before and have ran from it. But this is sort of a wake up experience for them. And long story short, so we support these halfway houses as far as with food and furniture and clothes and help as much as we can. And so they came by one night as like they had a service basically where one of them was telling her testimony, and it was sort of a Sunday night thing to where there wasn't a normal service. It was that we came and she basically told her testimony, and there was worship music and stuff, obviously. And it was an interesting mix of people from the Houseway House. So there was probably about, I'd say 50 to 70 of them. And then the church, which there's about 50 to 70 of them. And the thing that will forever be seared in my mind is that the 50 people from the halfway house, mix of men and women, because there's two different houses, were all in the front, like 12 pews, and everybody else from church normally was in the last back half. And then during service, during worship music, during the hymns and the worship, it was very interesting to see the different reaction during that part of worship. And so you had people that like this gentleman that know very, very in the front of their mind what they've been saved from. And their response to Christ in those moments is incredibly different than the response of those that have been in the church forever. Now, again, your expression of worship is not, I don't think you should be judged by that, but it is very interesting to see how people respond to hearing and remembering what Jesus has saved you from. I think that is sort of telling. And sometimes I think we get in a spot to where we're just, old and crusty, and we're like, yeah, we know. Yeah, Jesus saved me from my arrogance or my pride or my drug addiction. And we're just like, yeah, we remember it. We're very thankful. Versus people that it's in the front of their mind that they know where they were before. Like this gentleman in this TikTok, like he seems to very much know that like he had no purpose before Christ, and he tried to fill that with everything. And the reality that he now knows who Jesus is, and the real purpose that gives him, it's almost palpable in the video that you can tell like he knows all that stuff was worthless before, that he put all this value in, and he compared to Christ, like this was nothing. And like he knows that if you put Jesus next to that stuff, forget it. It's always Jesus. And I think that whole lesson that you said we could learn from him is that same lesson, like that will ever be seared in my mind. Like if I ever forget what Christ has saved me from, all I have to remember is that night with the people that have been in church forever versus the people that it was incredibly fresh in their mind what Jesus has saved them from, and say, man, like I love these people that have been in church forever, that have super deep theology, but I think oftentimes like we totally forget how amazing that grace really is. And we just get really comfortable in it. And we forget what the people in the front of the church knew in that moment, that, 4 months ago, they were, in jail because of some terrible decisions they had made, versus the people in the back that 12 years ago, God saved them for something. And they've lived in grace for so long, and their lives have been changed for so long that you forget about how drastic of a difference Jesus made in your life. And I think that's the video, is that man, it's very much in the front of his mind that Christ gives me the real purpose versus all the fake purpose I pursued before. And if we can just remember that, I think that's where it becomes like what you said, like some Christians won't do that at work, but I think some of the reason is that we get so comfortable in it that we're just like, yeah, Jesus saved me. It just becomes unamazing to people because they're like, great, okay, so how's that different than anything else? And we've been, I think, one last thing, and then I'll shut up for a minute. But I know at college, when I went to Indiana Wesleyan, there were a lot of students like me that had grown up in Christian homes, and we had lived under the grace of God for so long because our we didn't know who our parents were before they got saved. Like we'd always known them as these people that went to church and were loved people and respected people, and versus my wife that had, for the first probably 6 or 7 years of her life, her dad wasn't saved, and he smoked and he cussed and he drank all the time, and like there's a difference that, like when you grow up with that and you see that change in somebody's life versus me, that I didn't. I mean, I had great parents all the time versus, hearing stories about who they were before Jesus. And I think that's what we're seeing in that TikTok is that guy is just like, oh yeah, I know who Jesus is. Let me tell you about, all the things I did before. And I think if we remember that, a lot of that passion comes back because we know what we've been saved from again.
Yeah, if you don't, and again, I recently preached a sermon about this, and I briefly mentioned it before. But if you, in another episode, but if you just simply keep in mind as best you can, right? And this is part of why it's good to live, again, to jump back to other episodes, right? This is part of the benefit of living in the church, right? Amongst church people, Bible studies, all the things. Part of the good in that, the practical use, the selfish good in that is that you're constantly and consistently, if it's a solid church, you're going to continuously be confronted with sin that you're still dealing with, right? And so there will be a lot less of a temptation, or a lot less of a chance that you're going to continuously have that part of you in the back of your mind, right, in the background. But the scriptures, when in the New Testament, when they talk about the scriptures being a mirror, right? 1 John, when he talks about the man who looks in the mirror and then goes away and immediately forgets about what he looks like, right? That idea that's the problem, right? And so one of the things that I said in that sermon was that we have to be a people who carry that mirror with us, right? And who have that all the time, and who sees clearly the things that, and the mirror he's talking about is the Word of God, right? He looks into the mirror of the law, the mirror of the scriptures. And when you do that, when you're in the Word a lot, and when you're around God's people a lot, and you're listening to teaching a lot and those kinds of things, you are inevitably going to continuously be confronted with your sin. And so you stand a much better chance of being this guy most of the time, right? Maybe you're able to hold the emotions together, but there's going to be a constant thankfulness and a constant overwhelming joy, because you know who you are without Christ, and now you know who you are in Christ. And when you have both of those things clearly in view all the time, I mean, you can't ask for a better life than that.
Yeah. Well, and I think knowing that and remembering that really sets forth like what. So I'm sure you've probably preached about before. We may have even talked about it before, but this idea of where we have, like in Titus, where Paul talks about, doing good works. So this idea that when you know what you've been saved from and saved to, there is this outworking in your life of then you act and do things in a different way. Like what you said, like that man could have been, done and again, no shade on it, like you also said, but he could have easily been like, praise be to Jesus and pointed up. But rather like this almost above and beyond of getting on the knees and be like, this is what I did and this is what changed my life. And when, again, not that you're going to do that, like if you work at McDonald's in the drive-thru or something, I'm not saying that you're necessarily going to do that, but the idea being that there are things that you do that are distinctively different than the other people around you. So maybe it's the way that you talk, maybe it's the way that you treat people, maybe it's the honest way that you go about your business. There's going to be something that's distinctively different that is an outward working of this hopefully audible proclamation of who Jesus is. So it's great if I tell people at work that, I'm a Christian and I love Jesus and this is da-da-da-da-da. But if I'm not honest in my dealings with how I go about my business, what good is it that I'm even saying that I love? I mean, it's not doing a whole lot of good, because what do you do for you then? Just nothing. Like you just say you love Jesus. Like you did. I mean, what's the big difference? And I mean, that draws attention whenever there is that outward work. There's a guy that I know used to go to our church. He owns a business, a hardware store. It's a hardware and feed store. But the point being is that people will go to Mike because Mike is incredibly honest and upfront with people about his dealings. He's not going to, I mean, people know that Mike's not going to cheat you out. Mike's not going to try to jack up the price on you. Like, he's going to be honest with you. And the reason is because he's very blunt about the fact that, you know, he's been called to, he's a Christian, and Christians are supposed to operate in an honest manner. So even people that don't believe in Jesus, people that, you know, hate the church, will go to Mike because Mike is going to give you a good price, and Mike is going to do an honest dealing with you. And his business, in honestly a part of our area that's just not financially real great, that doesn't have a whole lot of people that have a whole lot of money, and really a business that wasn't doing great when he bought it, is thriving and growing because of Mike just living out his Christian principles and doing the things that he's been called to do as a believer. And that, I think, is just a testament to the fact that even people that don't know, don't care for, don't love Jesus, will respect and be like, man, there's something there that's different about you. And that, again, that's just one example that I have, but I think that it's incredibly important. And I think that's something that gets shown in this video as well, is that he's not just saying, hey, Jesus is my king. It's hey, this has completely changed my life. This is what it looks like. And if you're looking for it, I can tell you exactly where to find it. So.
Yeah, I think you're pointing to the story of the guy who just says, "Look, man, I don't know all the theology, right? I don't know exactly what happened or how he did it. All I know is that I can see now. That's all I've got.
It's an awesome story,
all
yeah.
I know, right? Yeah, and I really like that. We're most likely going to be doing Ephesians in church once we're finished with Matthew. And what I really love about this book and this letter that Paul writes is that he's intentionally teaching the church what the Christian life is supposed to look like. But to get there, which is the last 3 chapters of the 6-chapter book, to get there, it's 3 entire chapters of, this is what he's done for you. This is who he's made us. This is what our God has done. And so he reminds them for literally half the letter who they are in Christ and how big of a deal that is, and that you're saved by grace, and not because you earned it or deserved it or any of those things. So there's a need really of being constantly reminded of who we were without him. Who we are without him, and what we've been saved from, those kinds of things. There's a need in the Christian life. If we're going to be that guy, right, who's just overwhelmed with who God is and what he's done, then it starts by recognizing a consistent recognition of what he's done, of who you were before. And I think it's really only then that a person can truly live and benefit from and enjoy and like have true joy in who he has made you now.
Mm-hmm. Now that's a great point. I think just as the end there, I think that's a great point as far as to know how you're supposed to do things. You first have to know who you are and what he's done for you in order to live that out rightly and not become incredibly boastful in it. So, yeah. Good points. All right, guys. If you like it, as always, like, share, comment, all the cool things. And hold on. We'll talk to you next time.
Bye.